The Great Chamber of the Galaxy Council was the largest room ever built by any species. It floated in space between three star systems, a monument to cooperation and peace. 400 seats rose in circles around a central platform, and today every seat was filled. Representatives from dozens of species sat in silence, waiting for the words they all knew were coming. Park Do-yun sat alone in humanity's seat. He was the only human in the room, and he had been the only human in this room for the past 15 years. His hair had gone gray at the sides during that time. His eyes had grown tired, but his hands were steady as he watched the High Speaker rise from his throne. Velios of the Rithani Collective was tall and thin, with skin like blue metal and eyes that glowed soft yellow. His people had ruled this region of space for 10,000 years. They had seen species rise and fall like waves on an ocean. Velios believed that humanity was just another wave. "The Council has reached its decision," Velios announced. His voice filled the chamber through 100 translation devices. "After 300 cycles of study and debate, we have determined that the species known as humanity poses an unacceptable threat to galactic stability." Do-yun did not move. He had known this was coming for months. His government had known for even longer. "Human expansion is too fast," Velios continued. "Human technology is too unpredictable. Human nature is too." He paused, searching for the right word. "Chaotic? They do not follow the patterns of civilized development. They do not respect the natural order of growth and patience." Around the chamber, heads nodded. Tentacles waved in agreement. The Moravi clicked their shells. The Tesseri hummed low notes of approval. Do-yun watched them all and felt nothing but a deep, familiar tiredness. "Therefore," Velios said, "this Council declares a state of war against the human species and all their territories. A coalition of 12 species will participate in this action. The combined force will consist of 47 billion soldiers and 18,000 warships." The numbers hung in the air. They were meant to frighten. They were meant to show humanity the size of its mistake. Do-yun reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers found the familiar shape of his cigarette case. He pulled it out, opened it, and selected a cigarette with care. Then he put it between his lips and lit it with a small flame from his lighter. The chamber went silent in a different way now. This was not the silence of anticipation. This was the silence of shock. "Ambassador Park," Velios said, his yellow eyes narrowing. "Smoking is forbidden in this chamber. This is sacred space." Do-yun took a long drag from the cigarette. The smoke filled his lungs, and he held it there for a moment before letting it out in a slow, steady stream. The smoke rose toward the high ceiling and disappeared into the air recyclers. "Ambassador Park," Velios repeated, his voice harder now. "You will extinguish that immediately." "No," Do-yun said. "I don't think I will." The Rithani guards at the edges of the chamber moved forward, but Velios raised a hand to stop them. He stared at Do-yun with something that might have been curiosity mixed with his anger. "You have just heard a declaration of war against your entire species," Velios said. 18,000 warships will soon enter your territory. 47 billion soldiers will occupy your worlds, and your response is to smoke?" Do-yun took another drag. "Yes, do you not understand what is happening?" "I understand perfectly." Do-yun tapped ash onto the polished floor of the chamber. Several nearby representatives made sounds of disgust. "You have decided to go to war with humanity. That is your choice. You had other choices, but you made this one." "We made the only logical choice," Velios said. "Humanity is dangerous." "Yes," Do-yun agreed. "We are." He said it simply, without pride or anger. He said it like he was stating that water was wet or that space was dark. It was just a fact. "You do not seem concerned," Velios observed. "I am very concerned," Do-yun said. "War is terrible. People will die. Families will be destroyed. Worlds will burn. I am deeply concerned about all of this." He looked at his cigarette, watching the small glow at its tip. "But I am not surprised, and I am not afraid." "You should be afraid," said a new voice. This was Admiral Korath of the Tesseri fleet, a massive creature with 4 arms and skin like gray stone. My ships alone could glass your homeworld in a single day? Perhaps, Doyan said. But you won't. You think we lack the will? I think you lack the understanding. Doyan stood up from his seat. He was not a tall man, and he looked small in the great chamber, surrounded by aliens who were larger and older and more powerful. But he did not look weak. You see humanity as a problem to be solved, a disease to be cured, an error to be corrected. But that is not what we are. Then what are you? Velios asked. Doyan smiled, but there was no happiness in it. We are the species that split the atom and then used it to destroy 2 of our own cities. We are the species that invented medicine and poison in the same century. We are the species that walked on our moon and then spent 50 years arguing about whether we should go back. He took a final drag from his cigarette and dropped it on the floor, crushing it under his heel. We are chaos, High Speaker. And you cannot defeat chaos with order. You can only make it angry. The chamber was very quiet now. You have 7 solar days to respond to this declaration, Velios said finally. His voice was steady, but something in his eyes had changed. To surrender your outer colonies and accept supervision of your development. We'll need 3, Doyan said. 3 days? To consider surrender? To respond? Doyan straightened his jacket. We won't be surrendering. He turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Every eye in the chamber followed him. Ambassador Park, Velios called out. Do you truly believe your species can survive what is coming? Doyan stopped at the door. He did not turn around. High Speaker, he said, my species has survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and ourselves. We have survived everything the universe has thrown at us for 300,000 years. Now he did turn, just enough to look back over his shoulder? What makes you think you'll be any different? He walked out and did not look back again. Behind him, the Galaxy Council sat in a silence that felt different than before. They had expected fear. They had expected begging or threats or desperate diplomacy. They had not expected a man who lit a cigarette and shrugged. High Speaker. Velios looked at the crushed cigarette on the sacred floor of the chamber, and for the first time in his very long life he felt something he did not recognize. It would take him several days to realize it was doubt. The human vessel Persistence was small compared to the great ships of the elder species. It had no golden decorations or crystal windows. It was gray and functional, built to do a job and nothing more. But it was fast and it was tough, and it had carried Ambassador Park Do-yun safely through 15 years of difficult diplomacy. Now it carried him away. From the council chamber at maximum speed, Do-yun sat in his private quarters and stared at the communication screen. His hand hovered over the button that would connect him to Earth. He had made many difficult calls in his career. He had delivered bad news and received worse. But this was different. This was the call that would change everything. He pressed the button, the screen flickered, and then the face of Defense Minister Cho Yuna appeared. She was a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her life preparing for wars she hoped would never happen. Now one had arrived. They actually did it, she said. Her voice was calm, but Do-yun knew her well enough to hear the tension underneath. 12 species, he confirmed. Full military coalition. 47 billion soldiers, 18,000 capital ships. They're giving us 7 days to respond. Generous of them. Yuna's expression did not change. She was already thinking, already planning, already calculating. What's the mood in the council? Confident. They think it will be easy. They think we'll see the numbers and give up. And you told them otherwise? I told them we'd respond in 3 days. A small smile touched Yuna's lips. It was not a happy smile. Good, I'll wake up the Admiralty. And the others? The others. They both knew what that meant. It meant the contingency plans that had been drawn up decades ago. It meant the weapons that had been built in secret. It meant Protocol Starfall. How bad will it be? Do-yun asked. Yuna considered the question carefully. Bad, we can't match their numbers. We can't match their experience. Most of these species have been fighting wars since before humans discovered fire. She paused. But we've known this was possible for a long time. We've prepared? We have advantages they don't expect, such as the fact that they've never fought anything like us before. Her eyes hardened. Every war they've ever won was against species who thought the same way they do, who followed the same rules, who valued the same things. She shook her head. We don't, and that will matter more than they realize. After the call ended, Do-Yun poured himself a drink and sat by the window, watching the stars streak past. Somewhere out there, the coalition fleet was already gathering. Somewhere out there, soldiers were being loaded onto transports and weapons were being armed. The machinery of war was beginning to turn. And somewhere on Earth, other machinery was turning too. Admiral Kwon Tae-yun stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable, and read the message from Earth Command 3 times. He was a tall man with a scarred face and hands that had seen combat. He had joined the Navy at 18 and never left. Now, at 52, he commanded humanity's outer fleet, 300 ships that patrolled the borders of human space. The message was simple: Protocol Starfall. Effective immediately, Tae-yun set down his tablet and looked out at the stars. His executive officer, Commander Yun-hana, stood beside him, waiting. Send word to all ships, Tae-yun said quietly, and to all colonies in sectors 7 through 15. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. All civilians are to be moved to the inner systems within 48 hours. All of them, sir? Hannah asked. That's nearly 200 million people. All of them. Every man, woman, and child. Tae-yun turned to face her. The coalition will enter our space within the week. They expect to find populated worlds. They expect to take hostages and bargaining chips. They expect us to defend those worlds with everything we have, spreading our forces thin. And we won't? No, we'll give them empty space and let them wonder why. He allowed himself a small, grim smile. They've studied our history. They know we fight hard to protect our people. They're counting on that. So we're going to remove our people from the equation entirely. That will mean abandoning dozens of colonies, stations, outposts, everything our people built over the past century. Buildings can be rebuilt. People cannot. Tae-yun began walking toward the tactical center. There's something else, Commander. Something the coalition doesn't understand about humans. Sir? We're not attached to places. We're attached to each other. You can burn our cities and we'll build new ones. You can take our worlds and we'll find others. But as long as we have each other, we haven't lost anything that matters. He stopped and looked back at her. That's why we're going to win this war. Because they're fighting for territory and we're fighting for family. Across human space, the evacuation began. It was the largest movement of people in human history, and it happened almost in silence. Ships arrived at colony worlds and loaded families aboard without panic or chaos. People packed what they could carry and left behind what they couldn't. They didn't complain. They didn't argue. They understood. On the colony world of New Bizan, a young woman named Baek Jasu watched the evacuation ships fill the sky. She was a lieutenant in the Colonial Defense Force, 26 years old, with a round face and steady hands. She had been born on this world. She had grown up running through its forests and swimming in its oceans. She had always expected to die here, someday when she was old. Now she knew she would die here much sooner than that. Lieutenant Baek, her commanding officer called. A word. She followed him to a quiet corner of the command center. He was an old soldier named Sergeant Major Go Junpyo, with white hair and a face like weathered stone. You know what's being left behind when the civilians go, he said. Yes, sir. The mines. Enough antimatter to crack a moon. And someone needs to stay behind to arm them and set them off when the coalition fleet arrives. Jasu felt her heart beating hard in her chest, but her voice stayed calm. I volunteer, sir. I know you do. That's why I'm asking. Junpyo looked at her with something like sadness. You understand what this means. There's no extraction. No rescue. When you trigger those mines, you'll be right in the middle of them. I understand. Why? He asked. You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. Why volunteer for this? Jisoo thought about the question. She thought about her mother back on Earth, and her younger brother who wanted to be a pilot, and the boys she had loved in school who had moved to another colony. She thought about the forests of New Bizan and the way the sun looked when it set over the Western Ocean. Because someone has to, she said finally. And because if I don't, someone else will. Someone with a family waiting for them. Someone who's already given enough. She met his eyes. I'm not special, Sergeant Major. I'm just the one who's here. Jinpyo was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. The coalition thinks they're coming to conquer us, he said. They have no idea what they're walking into. No, sir, Jisoo agreed. They don't. Outside, the evacuation ships continued to rise into the sky, carrying 200 million humans to safety. And behind them, in the empty colonies and abandoned stations, the traps were being set. The war had not yet begun. But humanity was already fighting it. They just weren't fighting it the way anyone expected. Strike Force Purity crossed into human space on the morning of the 5th day. It was the largest military fleet ever assembled by the Council. 4,000 warships from 12 different species, moving in perfect formation through the darkness between stars. At its head flew the flagship of Commander Rethan Kari's, nephew of High Speaker Velius himself. Kari's was young for a commander, only 40 cycles old, which was barely adulthood by Rithani standards. But he came from a great family, and he had trained his whole life for this moment. He stood on his bridge and watched human space grow closer on his view screen. And he felt nothing but confidence. Report, he ordered. Long-range sensors show no enemy fleet activity, his tactical officer responded. No defensive positions. No weapons platforms. The border appears to be completely undefended. Corys allowed himself a small smile. They're running? Just as we predicted. The sight of our forces has broken their will to fight. It would seem so, Commander. Send word to High Speaker Velios. Tell him that humanity has proven itself to be cowards. We will have this war won within the month. The message was sent. And Strike Force Purity pushed deeper into human territory, finding the same thing everywhere they went. Nothing. Empty space stations, abandoned outposts, colony worlds with lights still on but no one home. It was as if humanity had simply vanished. Some of Chorus's officers found this strange. One of them, a senior captain named Moravi Tith, approached the commander with concerns. Sir, this feels wrong, Tith said. Humans are known for their aggression. Their history is filled with wars. Why would they flee without a single shot fired? Because they are not facing other humans, Kari's replied. They are facing us. They know they cannot win, so they run. It is logical, or it is a trap. Kari's turned cold eyes on his captain. Are you suggesting I am leading this fleet into danger? I am suggesting we proceed with caution, Commander. That is all. Caution is for those who fear failure. I do not fear failure, Captain. I am Rithani. Kari's turned back to his view screen. Continue the advance. I want to claim a human world by nightfall. The target he chose was New Bizan, a colony world on the edge of human space. It was a beautiful planet with blue oceans and green forests, and it had been home to 8 million humans. Now it was empty, or so the sensors said. I am detecting some life signs on the surface, the tactical officer reported. Very few. Perhaps 100. They appear to be concentrated around the main colony structure. Stragglers, Kari's decided. People who could not evacuate in time. We will take them prisoner and learn what we can about human defenses. He straightened in his command chair. All ships begin orbital descent. We will take this world in the name of the Council. 400 warships broke formation and began dropping toward New Bizan. They came in waves, their hulls glowing as they entered the atmosphere. On the ground below, Lieutenant Big Jisoo watched them come. She was alone in the command center now. The other volunteers had left hours ago, taking the last shuttle to safety. Jisoo had stayed behind because someone had to, and because she had made her peace with what came next. The mines were armed. 50 antimatter charges buried in a ring around the colony, each one powerful enough to destroy a city. When the Coalition fleet landed in the kill zone, she would trigger them all at once. The explosion would be visible from orbit. It would probably be visible from other planets. She would not survive it. But neither would they. "Lieutenant Beak," a voice said from her communicator. It was Admiral Kwon Tae-yun calling from the Indomitable, far away in the inner systems. "Status report." "Ready, sir," Jisoo replied. "They're entering atmosphere now? I count approximately 400 ships. You can still leave, Lieutenant. There's a shuttle hidden in the eastern forest. You could reach it before they land." "No, sir. I'll stay." And there was a pause. When Tae-yun spoke again, his voice was heavy. "Your mother sends her love. And your brother. He wanted you to know he's going to be the best pilot in the fleet." "For you," Jisoo closed her eyes. She felt tears on her cheeks, but her hands were steady on the controls. "Tell them I love them too. Tell them I'm not afraid." "I will, sir." "One more thing, yes? Make them pay for this. Not just for me, for all of us. Make them understand what they started. I promise you, Lieutenant. They will understand." The communication ended. Jisoo opened her eyes and watched the first Coalition ships touch down on New Bison's soil. They were huge and dark, covered in weapons. Soldiers began pouring out of them, spreading across the empty streets of the colony. Searching for humans to capture, they found nothing. No people, no defenses. Just empty buildings and silence. On his flagship, Commander Corys watched the landing with satisfaction. "Secure the colony," he ordered. "Find those remaining humans and bring them to me." "Commander," his tactical officer said suddenly, "I'm reading an energy signature. It's coming from below the surface." "What kind of energy signature?" The officer's face went pale. "Antimatter, sir. Lots of it. All around the colony." Corys felt something cold touch his spine. "Get our ships off that planet, now. All ships, emergency ascent, now." But it was too late. In the command center, Jisoo watched the Coalition soldiers getting closer. She could see them through the window, their weapons raised, moving carefully through the streets. They would reach her in minutes. And there were so many ships on the ground now, so many troops in the kill zone. It was time. She thought of her mother. She thought of her brother. She thought of New Bizen's forests and oceans and how beautiful they had been. "For Earth," she said quietly. "For all of us." She pressed the button. The world turned white. The explosion was not like anything the Coalition had ever seen. 50 antimatter charges detonating at once created a blast that tore through the colony, through the landed ships, through everything. The shockwave raced outward at incredible speed, swatting ships from the sky like insects. The fireball rose up through the atmosphere and kept going, a pillar of light that reached into space itself. 400 ships. 90,000 soldiers. Gone in an instant. Commander Corys survived only because his flagship had not yet landed. The shockwave hit his ship and sent it spinning, breaking systems and killing crew members. When he finally regained control, he looked down at New Bizen and saw nothing but a crater where the colony had been. "What? He whispered. "What have they done?" His tactical officer was bleeding from a wound on his head, but he was alive. "They destroyed themselves," he said, his voice shaking. "They destroyed their own world rather than let us have it. That's insane. No species does that. No species sacrifices their own planet. Humans do, sir." Corys stared at the burning world below him and felt something he had never felt before in his life. Fear. Real fear. He had studied humans. He had read about their wars and their weapons and their history. But he had not understood. He had not truly understood what they were. Capable of. They had not run from this war, they had just chosen where to fight it. He opened a communication channel to High Speaker Velios with hands that would not stop shaking. "Uncle," he said, "we have made a terrible mistake. The war was 9 hours old, and the Coalition had already learned its first lesson about humanity. The lesson was this: humans did not play by the rules. They did not fight fair. They did not value things the way other species valued them, and they were not afraid to burn. The news of new business spread through the coalition like a disease. 400 ships lost. 90,000 soldiers dead. A commander from one of the greatest families in the Rithani collective humiliated. And the war was not even 1 day old. High Speaker Velios called an emergency meeting of the coalition commanders. They gathered in holographic form aboard the command station, their faces grim and their tempers hot. Some demanded immediate revenge. Some demanded a change in strategy. Some quietly suggested that perhaps this war had been a mistake. We underestimated them, Admiral Korath of the Tesseri fleet said bluntly. We thought they would fight like civilized species. They do not. Then we will crush them with overwhelming force, Velios replied. We have 18,000 ships. They destroyed 400. We can afford such losses. They cannot, can we? Korath asked. Every day this war continues, our economies suffer. Our people ask questions. And the humans have shown they are willing to destroy their own worlds rather than surrender them. How many more new Bizons are waiting for us? We will be more careful. We will scan for traps before landing. And if the traps are in space? In asteroids? In the ships themselves? Korath shook his head. The species is insane, High Speaker. You cannot fight insanity with logic. But Velios would not back down. The coalition had committed to this war, and they would see it through. Orders went out to the remaining fleets. Advance with caution, but advance. Take human territory. Show them that their tricks would not save them. The coalition pushed deeper into human space. And the tricks continued. Their supply lines were attacked by small, fast ships that appeared out of nowhere and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Their communications were jammed by strange signals, human music, voices speaking in dozens of languages, sounds that made no sense but filled the channels with noise. Their soldiers began to hear rumors. The humans could be anywhere. The humans could be everywhere. On the colony world of Sejong Prime, the coalition finally found humans willing to stand and fight. This world had not been fully evacuated. Its population was too large, its importance too great. So instead of running, the humans had stayed to defend it. General Im Seojin commanded the defense. He was a small man with gray hair and a calm face, and he had 40,000 soldiers under his command. The coalition was landing 500,000. General, his aide said on the morning of the battle, the enemy outnumbers us more than 10 to 1. Our air support is limited. Our ammunition will not last more than a week of heavy fighting. The aide hesitated. How can we possibly win this? Seojin looked out the window of his command post at the city below. It was a beautiful city, full of homes and shops and schools, full of people who were counting on him. We don't need to win, he said quietly. We need to make them pay for every street, every building, every room. He turned to face his aide. The coalition expects us to meet them in open battle, army against army. That's how they've always fought, clean, organized, honorable. He shook his head. We're not going to give them that. We're going to make this ugly. The battle for Sejong Prime began at dawn. Coalition forces landed outside the city and advanced in perfect formation, their soldiers moving in disciplined lines. They expected the humans to meet them the same way. Instead, they found empty streets and silence. Then the shooting started. It came from everywhere and nowhere, from windows and rooftops and sewers. Human soldiers would fire a few shots and then disappear, moving through tunnels and back alleys that didn't appear on any map. Coalition troops would clear a building only to find enemies behind them. They would secure a street only to be attacked from the buildings they had already passed. They're not fighting like soldiers, a coalition officer reported in frustration. They're fighting like like predators, General Seojun said, listening to the intercepted transmission. We're fighting like predators, like the animals our ancestors were. He allowed himself a small smile. They wanted to know why humans are dangerous. Now they're learning. But it was not just the soldiers who fought. The civilians fought too. An old woman named Han Minyong ran a small shop in the Eastern District. She was 73 years old, with white hair and a bent back. When coalition soldiers came to her street, she smiled at them and offered them food. They did not know about the explosive she had hidden under the counter. The blast killed 6 soldiers and wounded 10 more. Minyong died in the explosion, but she died smiling. She had been born during the last great war on Earth, and she remembered what occupation felt like. She had promised herself she would never live under foreign rule again. She kept that promise. Stories like hers spread through the city. A schoolteacher who led soldiers into a trap. A doctor who poisoned the water supply at a coalition field hospital. A child who carried messages between resistance fighters. The coalition had come to conquer a population. Instead, they found a population that had become an army. "We don't have warriors," General Seojin told a captured coalition officer. They sat in a small room in the command post, and Seojin poured tea for them both. "That's what you don't understand about us. We don't have a warrior class. We don't have people whose job it is to fight." "Then what do you have?" the officer asked. "Everyone." Seojin sipped his tea. "Every human is a warrior. We just do other things between wars. We're teachers and farmers and shopkeepers. We're mothers and fathers and children. But when the war comes, we all fight." He set down his cup. "You brought 500,000 soldiers to this planet. You thought that would be enough? But there are 10 million people in this city, and every single one of them is your enemy." The officer stared at him. That's barbaric. Civilians are not supposed to fight. There are rules." "Yes, your rules. Made for your wars." Seojin's eyes were hard. "We didn't agree to those rules. We don't follow them. And that is why you're going to lose." The battle for Sejong Prime lasted 3 weeks. Coalition forces eventually took the city, but they paid for it with 200,000 casualties. And even after they claimed victory, the resistance continued. Soldiers were killed in their sleep. Supplies were stolen or destroyed. Collaborators were found dead in the streets. The coalition had won the battle, but they had not won the war. Meanwhile, far from Sejong Prime, Ambassador Park Do-yeon returned to the Galaxy Council. He requested permission to address the assembly. Many argued against it, but tradition demanded that even an enemy be allowed to speak. So Velios granted the request. Do-yeon walked into the chamber alone, just as he had before. The representatives stared at him with anger and confusion and, in some cases, fear. He had become a symbol of everything they did not understand about humanity. He stood at the central platform and looked around at the assembly. Then he asked a question that none of them expected. "Do you know why humans smoke?" The chamber was silent. They did not understand. "It's poison," Do-yeon continued. "We know it kills us. We've known for centuries. And we do it anyway." He pulled out a cigarette but did not light it, just held it between his fingers. "That's what you don't understand about us. We don't avoid pain. We don't always choose the logical path. Sometimes we choose things that hurt us because we want to, because we need to, because being human means making choices that don't make sense." He looked at Velios. "You thought you could predict us. You thought if you brought enough ships and enough soldiers, we would calculate the odds and surrender. But we don't work that way. We never have." He put the cigarette away. "We are the species that will burn our own worlds rather than see them taken. The species that will send our children into battle. The species that will keep fighting long after we should have given up, just because we don't know how to stop." His voice was quiet now, but it carried through the silent chamber. "So I ask you, High Speaker, do you really want to continue this war? Do you really want to find out just how far we're willing to go?" Velios said nothing, but his yellow eyes were uncertain in a way they had never been before. And outside the chamber, in the darkness of space, Admiral Kwon Tae-yeon's fleet was making its move. The next phase of the war was about to begin. Ambassador Park Do-yeon stood at the central platform of the Galaxy Council chamber and let the silence stretch. He had asked his question, and now he waited. The 400 representatives stared at him, trying to understand, trying to find the trick in his words. There was no trick. That was the point? You declared war because you thought we were dangerous, Do-Yun said finally. You were right. But not because of our ships or our weapons. He looked around the chamber, meeting eyes and sensors and receptors of every kind. We're dangerous because we're afraid. Afraid? High Speaker Velios leaned forward. You stand there and tell us you are afraid? Terrified, Do-Yun confirmed. Every human is afraid all the time. We're afraid of death. Afraid of pain. Afraid of losing the people we love? He paused. And when humans are afraid, we don't submit. We don't surrender. We adapt. We endure. We fight harder than we ever thought we could. Fear doesn't make us weak, High Speaker. It makes us survive. Pretty words, Admiral Korath rumbled. But words do not win wars. No, Do-Yun agreed. They don't. He pressed a small device in his pocket and every screen in the chamber changed. Instead of showing the Council's information feeds, they showed a star map. A very specific star map. This is the Rithani home system, Do-Yun said calmly. 3 worlds. 12 billion people. The heart of your collective. Velios was on his feet instantly. What is this? What are you doing? Showing you something. Do-Yun pointed to a cluster of dots at the edge of the system. Those are ships. Human ships. Admiral Kwan Tae-yun's Third Fleet. They arrived 6 hours ago. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted and screamed. Velios's guards moved toward Do-Yun, but he held up his hand. They're not attacking, he said loudly, cutting through the noise. They're just sitting there, waiting. Waiting for what? Velios demanded. For me to finish talking? The chamber went quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. This was the quiet of fear. You have 18,000 warships, Do-Yun continued. We have 4,000. You thought that meant you would win. But our ships are not where you expected them to be. They haven't been for months. He gestured at the screen. While your coalition was invading our outer colonies, we were moving, quietly, through routes you didn't know existed, past sensors you thought were watching. We've been building ships in asteroid belts you thought were empty. We've been positioning forces and systems you thought were secure. He let that sink in. Right now, there are human ships within striking distance of every coalition homeworld. Not enough to conquer you, but enough to hurt you. Enough to make you bleed the way you've made us bleed. His voice was hard now. You wanted a war? You have one. But it's not the war you expected. High Speaker Velios looked at the map, at the human ships sitting at the edge of his home system, and felt something cold in his chest. He had ruled the Rithani Collective for 200 cycles. He had never felt powerless. He felt powerless now. What do you want? He asked quietly. I want to offer you a choice. Do-Yun stepped closer to Velios. You can continue this war. You have more ships and more soldiers. Maybe you'll win. Maybe you'll burn Earth and kill every human in the galaxy. He paused. But you won't do it without cost. We will fight you on every world. We will attack your supply lines and your homeworlds. We will make you pay in blood for every inch of space you take. And even if you win, even if you kill every last one of us, you'll spend the rest of your civilization looking over your shoulder. Wondering if you miss someone? Wondering when the next human with a bomb and a grudge will come for you? The chamber was absolutely silent. Or, Do-Yun said, you can take the other choice, which is? Peace, full peace with trade agreements and mutual defense. We'll stop fighting. We'll withdraw our ships from your systems. We'll even share technology with you, the technology you were afraid of. Do-Yun's voice softened just a little. We don't want to destroy you. We never did. We just want to live. To grow. To be part of this galaxy. We'd rather make friends than enemies. We're good at that too when people give us the chance. Velios stared at him for a long moment. Why should we trust you? After everything that's happened? You shouldn't? Do-Yun said honestly. Trust takes time. It takes work. But it has to start somewhere. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his cigarette case. He looked at it for a moment, then set it on the platform in front of Velios. That's a gift. A human thing. Probably not good for you either, but that's not really the point. He smiled slightly. The point is that I'm giving you something, and I hope you'll give something back. Velios looked at the cigarette case. He looked at the human ships on the map. He looked at the representatives around him, waiting for him to decide. I must consult with the coalition, he said finally. This is not a decision I can make alone, I understand. Do-Yun nodded. We'll wait. The vote took 3 hours. 3 hours of argument and debate and fear. 3 hours of coalition members realizing that they had started a war they could not finish. Not without losses that would take generations to recover from. In the end. The vote was not even close. The coalition chose peace 6 months later. Ambassador Park Do-Yun stood in the same chamber where war had been declared and signed the Treaty of Harmonious Cooperation. The document was long and complicated, full of details about trade routes and technology sharing and mutual defense. But the core of it was simple. The war was over. Humanity and the coalition would move forward together. Beside Do-Yun stood Commander Rethan Karas. His face was scarred now from the explosion at New Bizan, and he walked with a limp that would never fully heal. But he had become an advocate for peace, speaking to anyone who would listen about what he had learned. I was wrong about your species, he told Do-Yun quietly as the ceremony ended. I thought you were primitive, chaotic, dangerous. We are dangerous, Do-Yun said. You were right about that part. Yes, but you're also... Corey struggled for the word. Stubborn, loyal, willing to sacrifice everything for each other. I didn't understand that before. He looked at Do-Yun with something like respect. I understand it now. After the ceremony, a journalist approached Do-Yun for an interview. She was young and eager, and she asked the question everyone wanted answered. Ambassador Park, when the council declared war on humanity, you didn't seem worried. You lit a cigarette and walked out. How did you know it would end like this? Do-Yun thought about the question. He thought about Lieutenant Baek Jasu, who had died at New Bizan so that others could live. He thought about General Im Seo-jin and the defenders of Sejong Prime. He thought about Han Ning-young and her shop and her smile. He thought about every human who had fought and died and sacrificed during the war. I didn't know, he admitted. I hoped. I believed. But I didn't know. Then why weren't you afraid? He smiled, but there was sadness in it. I was afraid. I was terrified, every single day. But I also knew something about my species. I knew we don't give up. We don't stop fighting. We don't surrender, even when we probably should. He looked out the window at the stars. We've been doing it for 300,000 years. Ice ages couldn't stop us. Plagues couldn't stop us. We couldn't even stop ourselves, though we tried hard enough. He turned back to the journalist. So when the council declared war, I knew how it would end. Not because I could see the future, but because I know who we are. And who is that? Do-Yun reached for his cigarette case, then stopped. He had been trying to quit. Some habits could be broken with enough time and effort. We're humans, he said simply, and we always find a way. He shook the journalist's hand and walked away, leaving the chamber behind. Outside, the stars were bright and cold and full of possibility. Somewhere out there, new colonies were being built and old wounds were healing. Somewhere out there, humans were doing what they had always done, surviving, adapting, moving forward. The galaxy had tried to stop them. The galaxy had failed, and now, for better or worse, the galaxy would have to live with them. Do-Yun smiled and walked on into the future. It was going to be interesting.